It was a week that felt like a year. The president tried to turn the tide on public sentiment about the economy.
Everything now is falling, and the only things that are going up are your salaries, the stock market, and your 401ks.
He promised he'd bring costs down on day one. That was his number one promise.
At what point does it become the Trump economy? Well, it's a Trump economy now.
Congress left town without a deal on health insurance subsidies, but not before some Republicans broke ranks to force a January vote.
We were really left with no choice.
We'll continue to work on health care in the new year. Hopefully over the next 3 weeks, we will actually see some changes and some bipartisan efforts.
The Epstein files came out. Sort of.
So, I mean, we've just gotten these files, Connell. Obviously, It's a massive trove. We're talking about 300,000.
President Trump has said for years that he wants full transparency and he wants the Department of Justice to release everything that we can.
The law requires all unclassified documents related to Epstein to be released. It's obvious they have not met that standard.
I expect that we're going to release more documents over the next couple of weeks.
But at this point, what we need is a clear timeline of when the rest of the documents will be released.
And the United States moved ever closer to war with Venezuela.
It's a blockade. We're not going to let anybody going through that shouldn't be going through.
It is clear that the current status quo with the Venezuelan regime is intolerable for the United States.
Let's get into all of it. With us today, Congressman Dan Crenshaw, a Texas Republican, on the strains within his party. Congressman Eric Sorensen, Democrat of Illinois, whose perch on the Armed Services Committee gives him special knowledge about those controversial boat strikes off of Venezuela. And how about some glad tidings? Jeffrey Rosen, head of the National Constitution Center, has a new book. All that and our best in the business panel of journalists. The Hill Sunday starts now. Hello from Washington this Christmas week, and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. On Saturday, U.S. forces seized a second oil tanker leaving Venezuela 11 days after the first, which is now, with its valuable cargo, in Galveston, Texas. On Tuesday, the president made his position clear. There would be, quote, a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. The next day, Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, ordered his country's Navy to begin escorting tankers. This brings the prospect of a naval battle, such as it would be with Venezuela's dilapidated forces, into the realm of possibility. What began as an anti-drug campaign to kill smugglers on the high seas now looks increasingly like a more conventional conflict in which the United States is at odds with a government. With us now, Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas. He is a member, fortunately for us, of the House Intelligence Committee. Okay, Congressman, you have been supportive. You've talked about narco-terrorists. You've talked about, it sounded like you were broadly supportive of the boat strikes, that this is an unconventional enemy and it has to be fought with unconventional means.
Yep.
How does that align with the oil tankers and the Maduro regime?
Yeah. I mean, I do want to take some credit for kind of starting this conversation back in 2021.
Okay.
I introduced an authorized use of military force against cartels, and President Trump has obviously taken that to exactly the level I want him to. I think he's doing a great job. So how is it all related? Well, the Maduro regime is related to the cartel business, pure and simple. It is, we have plenty of evidence that it's not just that they let it happen or can't stop it. They actively participate and profit from it. You know, Maduro himself, a lot of the senior people in his administration have been indicted in U.S. courts on these charges. So it's all related, right? That money comes into Venezuela. Also, Russians are there. They've invited the Russians in. They've invited the Chinese in, the Iranians in. A lot of Iranian weapon systems coming in. That goes to Venezuelan military. That also goes to the cartels that they support. So yeah, it's all related.
Okay, so there's a good idea or bad idea argument. Then there's a constitutional or unconstitutional argument. And people who are broadly supportive of those aims will also say that the president needs authorization from Congress. The War Powers Act dictates other things would say that the president needs to come to Congress and get authorization if this is about regime change and not about stopping the flow of drugs.
Well, you made the point right there yourself, if.
Right.
But it's not. So right now we are taking out known terrorists, designated terrorist drug boats with a high amount of intelligence on that, to make it through the process of saying, yes, we're going to strike that kinetically. There is a long process that goes on at the Department of War, and it's very well vetted. It's very rigorous. It needs to be multi-sources of intelligence, and if there's any doubt at all, they will either try to interdict or not be able to do anything. Now, that kind of also shows the problem of the way we've been doing this for years. You can't interdict your way out of this. You don't possibly have the resources.
You mean that we don't have the resources to stop all the boats and search them? And do that stuff.
You know, I mean, some people are like, this is a law enforcement job. Just go interdict them. Like in the ocean, like how many boats do you think we have just floating around there? How many helicopters do you think we have? ISR platforms. I mean, it's ridiculously expensive and impossible. And here's the thing, we haven't done a strike in the Caribbean in over a month. Isn't that something?
That it's all Pacific side?
I don't know, but why haven't we done it in over a month? Because they can't find anyone to pilot those boats anymore.
Yeah. So you think it's having the desired
It's not
effect.
us deciding that. Right. It's just we don't have the targets anymore.
Okay.
The deterrence has worked.
Okay. Should the administration make the case that you just made with evidence and show videos and make the case? Because I may not have been watching, but I haven't heard that same case made as succinctly from the administration. If it's true that you think Congress doesn't need to authorize what's going on, should they? I kind of thought when the president came out to give his speech last week that it was going to include this, that we were going to hear the rationale behind this. Do we need more from the administration to explain to the American people about this?
We've gotten it in Congress, and they did actually a really great job last week in the auditorium in talking about how rigorous that process is. Again, I can't go into exact details on that, but I can tell you what I just told you. I think they've been pretty transparent. You've seen, you guys just played videos.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why anyone's saying they're not getting videos. And again, this is no different from any of the terrorist strikes that we've been taking for the last 25 years. There is no legal difference. Now, if you want to talk about putting troops on the ground and for regime change in Venezuela, I haven't heard a peep from the administration on that. That does not seem to be their intent. So we would be speaking in complete hypotheticals about that. But as for the actions right now, Obama did this. Obama went much further. We actually went after Gaddafi in Libya, and that was legally justified.
And used drones to kill an American citizen.
That was a legally justified action based on the reasoning that it was short in duration.
Right.
It was not an occupation. And it was in self-defense to the United States, and that justification was welcomed. It was accepted.
Right.
Goes back to Jefferson and the Barbary Pirates.
Right.
So there's plenty of legal precedent for this, and there's plenty of legal justification for it. As far as regime change, I mean, Joe Biden called for more elections in Venezuela after Maduro stole those elections. I, of course, agree with him on that. I don't think there's a Democrat or Republican that agrees that this is a legitimate regime. And so what I think President Trump's strategy is right now is using legal means, which is like actually enforcing the sanctioned embargoes to dry up the money that is propping up this regime.
Okay. You can't leave until you talk about Obamacare. This is the law of Washington this week.
Yeah.
You voted for an alternative House plan. You didn't sign a discharge petition for a 3-year extension of the COVID-era Obamacare subsidies.
Right.
But it passed, and when Congress reconvenes, you're going to get a chance to vote on that. How are you going to vote on that?
On the extension?
On the extension.
Is this a clean extension?
Yeah.
No way.
Okay.
I mean, look, this is an extension that came into existence during COVID in order to attempt to mask the cost of a failing program. Premiums have gone up 80% because Obamacare is in existence. Why is that? Well, a lot of reasons. One, they overregulate the market so much that it can't possibly offer different plans to people and offer the flexibility that insurance companies need to meet your needs. Okay, Obamacare wants everybody in one place. That's a problem. That is one thing that we passed. For instance, allowing small businesses, that passed last week, allowing small businesses to engage in association healthcare plans. That allows them to band together in a way they wouldn't be able to before, so that they can at least have the same benefits that big companies do. And so Democrats put expiration dates twice on these extra tax subsidies. Now, let's be clear. The way the ACA works is that it subsidizes insurance companies and then says, okay, now give poorer people cheaper premiums.
Right.
It's a pretty strange way to do things. It's like subsidizing a grocery store and then not letting anyone know what the groceries cost, and then saying, "Hey, can you just give cheaper food to people who are
with
poor?"
less money.
But it wouldn't make sense to do that, right? You would use a voucher system. So what do we want to do long term? Last week was a series of I wouldn't call that the Republican plan. My plan, generally speaking, and this is in line with what President Trump has said as well, if I could wave magic wands right now and change the healthcare system, those subsidies wouldn't go to insurance companies. They would go to a health savings account.
And that's like the Cassidy bill that came out on this.
Yeah. Guys like Cassidy are in line with this sort of thinking. Mine would go further. Everyone would have a health savings account. The subsidies would go into that account, so the patient gets the money, and the patient gets to decide how they want to buy their insurance.
So practically speaking, if the Senate sent you back something that was a short-term, a year or 2-year extension of the enhanced subsidies with something like that, is that something
if I could remake the model, so there's a few things. One, price transparency, which actually Democrats and Republicans all agree on. That was also in our bill last week, PBM price transparency. Oh, the only one who doesn't is Bernie Sanders. That's a weird one. I mean, Bernie Sanders is the real sticking point in all of this. You know, we passed the Lower Cost Price Transparency Act 2023. 320 members voted for that, so very bipartisan. Bernie Sanders was the one who killed that in the Senate. That was just price transparency across the board. Okay, just this week, he killed the Give Kids a Chance Act. That passed out of our House, Democrat, Republican, 0 votes.
Yeah, he's taking heat.
0 no votes.
Side, yeah.
Like, I don't know what is it. He wants this system to fail because he wants single payer. And he knows that it will continue to fail because it needs these increasingly large subsidies in order to even survive. That's not a good system. We can remake the system in a way that gives people what they need, which is health care, but also does it in a way that is market-based and sustainable. So that's generally our plan. Give the patient the money instead of the insurance companies, and then you take that extra. Then you take money and you put it into reinsurance programs.
Right.
And that keeps premiums down low at a much larger and more sustainable level. Basically, we're talking about catastrophic care or risk pools. These are all the same terms.
You know I want to keep going, but we have to say goodbye. We have to say, and we have to thank you for making
get as much as I can out.
It was good. It was good.
Seconds.
It was good. It was a lot. But Congressman, we thank you and Merry Christmas.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you. Okay. If you lived between Carroll Lane and Joy Village in Splendora, Texas, you would know him already. But if you don't, here he is, Congressman Dan Crenshaw. We thank you. Okay. Let's go to the other side of the aisle. With us now, Congressman Eric Sorensen of Illinois. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for being here. Okay, I want to start with the question. The discharge petition was discharged, but the law is not passed, right?
Correct.
What do you see happening when these subsidies come back in front of Congress for a vote in the new year?
Well, let's also step back and say now we have the majority of the House of Representatives saying that we should vote on this.
With four Republicans.
Right. So they joined Democrats. So now you can say that this is the majority of Americans, or I should say the majority of Congress in the House that wants to lower the costs.
Right.
Okay. So why didn't the Speaker of the House bring that up to a vote? You know, if I were him, I would have just wanted that to go away. All right, let's just vote on it and send it to the Senate.
And even with just the amendment, because the amendment probably would have been enough.
Right, and then give it to Thune, right? But he didn't do that. And so, you know, I think politically it is a failure on his part because here we are, we're now talking about it again. Right? We're talking about it and we get to New Year's Eve and into New Year's Day and premiums are going to go up. By many people in my district that are saying $1,000 a month, my premiums are going up. Why didn't the Speaker of the House do anything if he knew that the majority of the House was for it?
So you heard your colleague from Texas, Congressman Crenshaw, say basically that, you know, if there's a larger package, if there's a larger deal that comes back from the Senate, that if I'm reading, but I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounded like there would be some openness maybe to an extension on the subsidies if it was part of a deal. Here's what Richard Neal, who's the ranking member on Ways and Means, had to say.
The only path forward is Leader Jeffrey's discharge petition. 3-year extension, clear and clean, bipartisan.
Okay. You point out about the political liabilities for Republicans in this, and they are many, right? Going into this election year, when you take the Medicaid cuts that came in their reconciliation package, and then this is a political nightmare for Republicans. And I get that part. But is there a danger here that Democrats are so focused on the political pain that this is causing Republicans, and we don't get to a deal that the bargain is too hard?
Well, I mean, look, you know, one member that is not going to come back to the House is Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she was listening to her constituents, and she does not represent Atlanta.
Right.
The same way that I'm in Illinois, I don't represent Chicago.
Right.
You listen to people in small town America today, and they are hurting. You know, and so they are also reaching out to their members of Congress, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, saying, you need to fix this.
Right.
And even she was so frustrated that she said, nobody is fixing this, I gotta leave.
Right.
Right? Because I'm not doing what the people want me to do. It is time for the House GOP to stop the politics and actually do what's right. And I'm thankful that there are those that are coming across the aisle, because as you know, Chris, the only thing that gets done in the House right now are bipartisan.
So, but the way that it might not pass is that if the discharge petition might not pass, is that if there's something on offer that says it's a deal, let's make a deal. So I'll ask you kind of the same question I asked Congressman Crenshaw, which is, are you open to a deal that includes, yes, an extension for those enhanced subsidies, but also has some of those kind of Republican, what they would call reforms attached to it?
So I will say, Chris, if it is going to lower the cost of the premiums so that the people in my district can afford it, yes, we need to work together.
Okay. On this matter of Venezuela, you have seen video that the rest of us haven't seen. You heard Congressman Crenshaw's depiction of what is going on. This is legal. And that he's satisfied with what Congress has heard. What have you seen, and what can you tell us?
Well, I'm not giving anything away that I had learned in the confidential briefing, but I can tell you that the video that I saw was horrific, and it needs to be released to the American people so that they can see what happened. Because what I saw was, and as a meteorologist, you were looking from a high altitude through the clouds, and to take out a boat, then you fly down to a lower elevation, and then you realize that there's people there that are waving for help. And then it took 40 minutes before, boom. That's not American, and it's not okay. And so the questions that need to be asked, where was the Secretary of Defense? Why did he leave Admiral Bradley out to dry? And we need to ask these tough questions, because when I was there, the tough questions were being asked by Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
This is not a political thing, because the worry that I have is the rest of the world is seeing this, Chris. The rest of the world is saying, all right, if Americans say now that this is okay, and I'm not saying that those people that were on that boat were innocent, right? But if we say that's okay, and then we have soldiers in Syria who were not just killed, but they were injured, we're saying it's okay for our adversaries to come back and murder them. That's not right.
Do you think the rest of us are going to get to see that video? Do you think that ever comes out?
My hope from the House Armed Services Committee and our ranking member and even the chairman, yes, I think we do need the transparency. And I don't believe that gives any, confidential or any process from the military away. We need the American people to understand if this is right and it aligns with their values.
Okay. By the way, do you know what happens to the oil? What do we do with the oil?
I wish I had a briefing on that.
From the seized vessels. Do we know?
I wish I had a briefing on it, Chris.
All right, we're gonna find out. We'll find out. Okay.
Thank you,
Congressman. We thank you for your time. All right. If you were nervous about checking your stocking in Coal Valley, Illinois, you would know him already. But if you don't, here he is, Congressman Eric Sorensen. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to you. Coming up, can the right unite? We go live to Turning Point USA's national conference, where claimants to Charlie Kirk's legacy have been in a rhetorical brawl. Plus, the uproar over the latest Epstein files blackout when we come back. It has been just a little more than 100 days since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and this is the final day of the first national convention of the group he founded, Turning Point USA, since his death. What his widow and successor, Erica, had sought was unity. What they got was anything but. One thing everyone seems to agree on is that they really, really like Vice President J.D. Vance, today's keynote speaker. We go live now to our own Libby Dean, who's in Phoenix. Libby, what's all the hubbub?
Well, hey, Chris, these disagreements have really been happening between some of the largest and most prominent names in Republican politics, people like Tucker Carlson, people like Ben Shapiro. And one thing that we've heard from some of the speakers who have been taking the stage throughout the last few days is they'll take the stage, Chris, and they'll say, you know what, I disagree with what the person prior to me or prior to that person said, but that didn't stop me from taking the stage here today. And that is essentially what Charlie Kirk did as well. But this is definitely a split that we're seeing within the Republican Party when it comes to messaging, whether it's staying completely loyal to President Trump and his messaging or straying a little bit away, because we know that some of that messaging is not even landing with some of the young conservatives that I've spoken with on the ground throughout the last day or so since we've been here. One of those prominent names that I've spoken with is Andrew Colvin, and he is the new spokesperson for Turning Point USA and was one of Charlie's best friends. And he said, you know what, it's good for these disagreements to happen in public, this disagreement that we saw on the stage between Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. But this is a split actually from what some of the young conservatives that I spoke with on the ground here say. They say that's not good for the Republican Party and the movement moving forward. So there is this split actually between the new guard, which is the majority of Turning Point USA, these younger voters, and the old guard, which is the spokesperson itself. So it's been really interesting to see that messaging even play out on the stage behind me. And you mentioned, Chris, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, how there's this consensus among all conservatives that he is the heir apparent of the GOP, and specifically here at Turning Point USA. But I will mention, I've spoken with some young conservatives here who have floated some other names, people even like Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, of course, who did run against President Trump last election cycle. So it's interesting to see that play out in this difference between the old guard and the new guard here at Turning Point USA. And we speak with those young conservatives on the ground here who say this movement has only grown since Charlie Kirk's assassination that happened back in September, that there was a lot of people that I've spoken to who weren't involved in Turning Point at all until all of that tragedy did play out. Now, the other thing I want to mention, the vice president was endorsed by Erica Kirk, of course, for 2028 to be president, and we know he'll take the stage later today, Chris.
Libby Dean, live in Phoenix, we thank you very much for helping us out. Okay, also helping us out is our best in the business panel of journalists. Joe Khalil, oh yeah, senior Capitol Hill correspondent for NewsNation. Our friend Sabrina Siddiqui, she's the national politics reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And please meet Stephanie Slade, she's senior editor for Reason Magazine, making her debut here on the panel. It's good. Okay, Joe, I know what you spent Friday doing. Okay. One of the things that is dividing the right now is the administration's handling of the Epstein files. Yeah. And the massively redacted. I saw one document that was 100 pages that were all blacked out. Yeah. There is upset at TPUSA. There is upset in a lot of places that they're not complying. What do you know? What should we know?
So here's the frustration that I'm hearing from lawmakers, particularly on the Republican side. They want to sort of get over this, and they can't do it, particularly when the files come out and all of a sudden what is redacted is almost now a bigger story, a bigger narrative than what has actually come out, what developments that we've learned that are in the files. And I mean, the DOJ continues to say, we're following the law, we're complying with the law, we're releasing everything on a timely basis. But I mean, they got community noted twice on X saying, actually, the law says you have to release everything. Right?
And I've heard that there were documents that were put up and then taken down and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, like 16 of them, including some of the pictures of President Trump, actually. Yeah. So it's not a good look. And even Republicans that are very much, you know, MAGA-esque are getting a little frustrated that the story is not going away because they think of the handling of how this is going.
Sabrina, why? Why? I've watched from pen to post. Susie Wiles in her famous or infamous, whatever you think of Susie Wiles, where she's talking about Pam Bondi's mishandling of this, and that from pen to post, this has been a comedy of errors, at least in the communications part. What is the White House say? Think about this. What are they going to do about this? What's up?
Well, I think that there's been a bit of a blame game, as you point out, with Susie Wiles blaming Attorney General Pam Bondi. But we've seen President Trump change his tune a few times on whether or not these files should be released. And the big question here is why this lack of transparency exists and what the political ramifications of that are, because you have had members of the president's own base demanding more transparency. And what's notable to me is that, there was a Reuters poll out last month showing that just 44% of Republicans approved of the president's handling of this issue. Yeah. That is arguably one of the lowest set of marks that he's received for any issue. So it demonstrates why this matters politically. And I think in some ways, by not offering anything new here, by redacting a lot of this key information, we don't know much about why there isn't more about charging decisions by the Justice Department. We don't have access to FBI interviews with survivors, why Epstein was able to evade any serious federal crimes for many, many years. By not being more forthcoming, what they've risked is inviting even more scrutiny and keeping this issue alive politically.
If you're going to do a dump on a Friday night, do the dump. Actually, don't just beg the question.
Sorry, can I add also? Sabrina brought up a point about the political effects of this. Susie Wiles said she doesn't think it impacts the base as much. They don't care. Who cares is the podcast manosphere. I just think she's underestimating how much that group influences the base. Right?
Never underestimate the manosphere. Okay, Stephanie, here's a question. For people who aren't on the right wing, for people who aren't conservatives, this fight over uniting the right and TPUSA probably seems a little foreign. The Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Steve Bannon, all of these luminaries of sort of the MAGA-verse, trading accusations, saying these really ugly things. Please be our guide into the space. What is going on?
Yeah, what we're seeing now is a schism that's existed on the right for quite a while. But up until now, I think people mostly looked at it as the sort of MAGA pro-Trump faction versus the never-Trumpers or the anti-Trump faction. But what we're now realizing is, no, even within the pro-Trump MAGA universe, the people who are showing up at Turning Point USA and speaking at these conferences, who support Trump, who probably support J.D. Vance for president, in 3 years, there's still a really deep ideological schism there about whether you sort of hew to a little bit more of an old school, free market, limited government kind of version of conservatism, or if you are on the more, that would be the Ben Shapiro side of this, or if you're on the more Tucker Carlson side, where it's much more about grievance-based identity politics.
Also, the Jews, right? There is the anti-Semitism, who is subservient to Israel and all of that stuff, and that makes it much uglier.
It does, absolutely. But I think what is happening on the Tucker Carlson side of this divide is they're saying the left has been playing identity politics, and they've been trying to other us and make us feel like we're not welcome in our own country. And so we're going to play it right back, and we're going to play it even harder. And that's where the sort of anti-Semitism, racism, white nationalism, Christian nationalism sort of starts to sneak in.
Oh, Merry Christmas. Merry, Merry Christmas. Okay, still to come. We've heard the arguments about whether to extend enhanced Obamacare subsidies, but not enough about the why they're needed. The Wonderwall knows all when we return. All right, the debate in Washington is about whether or not to extend enhanced Obamacare subsidies. We understand the politics here are intense, but maybe we should think about why these subsidies are deemed necessary. What is driving costs for Obamacare so much higher than the already brutal pace of increase for employer-based insurance? Both employer-based insurance and Obamacare prices are being pushed up by what? Higher cost in healthcare. Some of that is actually good news. Innovations like obesity drugs, immunotherapy, and other treatments that are going to extend lives and may actually bring the cost down, may push costs down. Then there's the consolidation that's taking place in hospitals and health systems. These organizations have more clout with their increased size and can bargain with insurers for higher rates. But there is something else happening with the Affordable Care Act, too. The program at the heart of Obamacare is a marketplace where people without employer-based health insurance can go to get policies. Some of these folks pay full freight. That's a little green cap at the top. Others with lower incomes or who have high-risk needs that drive policy costs upward get subsidies from taxpayers. These marketplaces you'll see over there on the edge struggled to attract big numbers until you see right there in 2022. That's when those COVID-era subsidies kicked in. So it is no surprise that nearly 10 million more people came into the pool, while the number of non-subsidy folks, the green caps, stayed basically the same for the whole decade. And that partly explains this. Employer-based insurance premium, the blue bar, have been steadily rising. You know it, you felt it in your pocketbook, while the green bar, which is Obamacare, nearly doubles. Democrats believe that these exchanges have reached equilibrium and finally caught up with expectations. Republicans will tell you that this is just the beginning of what will be more and more high-risk, lower-income recipients joining the program. The CBO projects a $350 billion cost for extending the subsidies if they're kept in place for the next decade. But that could go up if the risk pool changes. Democrats will tell you it's worth the price.
We've successfully secured a vote with a successful discharge petition to protect the health care of the American people and extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. American people deserve a vote today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, today.
And we are back with our best in the business panel. Joe, I know you know what is going to happen in Congress when they come back, so why don't you tell us, are they actually is this gonna pass the House and die in the Senate? What's gonna happen?
You would be mistaken if you think I know what's gonna happen with anything with this Congress. So look, on the extension of these subsidies, the only game in town right now is Democrats' 3-year extension, which is gonna get a House vote. I think most Senate folks see that as a starting point. There are a lot of people who don't wanna see these subsidies extended at all, and there's gonna be a big fight on it. But there is this group of moderates in the Senate right now. They feel that this is going to stay alive. The politics of not doing anything are very real, very consequential. And I think at this point, that sort of 3-year extension may be seen as a starting point where you may end up landing on some kind of 1 to 2 year compromise. I'll just add, if that happens, it may very well be in January when people actually get their statements and see on paper, oh my God, my premiums are going up. They may not be paying attention now, but they will when they get that. So.
Sabrina, there could be a sort of a strange Lovian approach here, that if the Republicans figure they're going to lose Congress anyway, if the House is gone and maybe conceivably the Senate, why do something like this? So you have everybody at odds, and they're all waiting for one thing, which is for Donald Trump to tell them what he wants to do. But he's very cagey about this. You've written about this. He's very cagey about it. At some point, does the president weigh in and say, this is what I want you to do, let him go, or jump in behind a plan?
I mean, you seem to be saying it's almost like the president could actually have some influence over his own party.
It's possible.
Right? It's possible. I mean, that's what's been so telling throughout this fight. I mean, President Trump is not shy to state his opinion on really anything and everything under the sun, but he has not staked out a clear position on this issue. He's said he's open to extending subsidies. He's called for health savings accounts that go directly to the American people, but he has not endorsed any one proposal.
Right.
And what we've heard in our reporting is that he's hearing conflicting advice from aides. There are some who say this is going to be a huge issue if premiums skyrocket, healthcare costs go up, in what's going to be the affordability election. That's going to be a huge problem for Republicans. And there's other aides who are saying it will anger the base if we do anything that extends a piece of Obamacare, a law that conservatives have spent such a long time railing against.
Are they going to extend these?
So the thinking now here is that President Trump may come back and retroactively ask Congress to retroactively address this issue and do some kind of short-term extension to buy more time. But again, it's really a question of whether he's willing to throw his full weight behind this.
So that's definitely maybe. Okay.
Definitely maybe.
Stephanie, the hope for Republicans is that the provisions of the president's big, beautiful bill and other things are going to kick in, and that the tariff pain will go down, and that there will be these green shoots in the economy in the coming year. The mood of the public right now is the opposite of that. What's the chance that the good economic news is going to come and lift the Republican votes?
Anything could happen, but I think what's comical about this is we're seeing exactly the same thing that Republicans spent 4 years criticizing Biden and the Democrats for, which is telling people that they shouldn't be feeling what they're really feeling, is now happening in the reverse, right? Yeah. And it was true under Biden. They could say, like, well, by the end of his term, inflation had come down. But when prices have gone up and up and going up, and now the inflation, the rate of increase of prices going up comes down. That doesn't make people feel much better. Like, inflation could go to zero. Things are still way more expensive now than they were when Biden took office. I think that's the thing that we're going to be facing in the next coming years. Even if they can reverse some of the bad trends, people are not happy with the state of the things, the prices that they're paying, and there's nothing that's going to happen that's going to bring those prices down, especially with these tariffs that are.
But if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs, maybe there's a boost.
Yeah, it could happen. I mean, we'll see how they try to spin that if that's what ends up happening.
That's the Donald Trump answer, is we'll see what happens, right? That's what we're supposed to say. Panel, thanks so much for being here this Christmas week. It makes me very happy to see all your smiling faces.
Likewise.
Excellent. All right, still to come, the head of the National Constitution Center, Jeffrey Rosen, joins us to talk about the battle over power in America when the Hill Sunday returns. On the 4th of July, the United States of America will celebrate 250 years of independence, which is fun. It's cool. But we will also be celebrating a quarter millennium as a nation, which is hard. That's why throughout this milestone year, we on the Hill Sunday are helping you to get your citizenship up to snuff in time for the big day. Now, at the heart of the American experiment is the debate about who should hold power and how they should exercise it. It's a debate that our next guest traces to our very beginning. Listen to this. For Jefferson, the growth of centralized power always threatened liberty. For Hamilton, a vigorous national government could help secure liberty. Jefferson, author of the Declaration, was determined to expand democracy. Hamilton, defender of the Constitution, viewed democracy as a turbulent force to be filtered and checked. The competing positions of Hamilton and Jefferson are like golden and silver threads woven throughout the tapestry of American history, sometimes side by side, sometimes crossing each other, and at critical moments pulling so far apart that they threaten to snap. That is from the new book, The Pursuit of Liberty, How Hamilton versus Jefferson Ignited the Lasting Battle Over Power in America. And the author is Jeffrey Rosen. He is the president and CEO of the National Constitution Center. Jeffrey Rosen, we welcome you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for writing this book, which is good.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
It is good, and we steal your stuff all the time when we do civic stuff here, and you guys are a great resource for us and for our viewers, so thank you for that. Jefferson versus Hamilton. We know the musical, we know the story, but give us the précis. What's the 30,000-foot view here? What's the premise?
The premise is that Jefferson and Hamilton's basic battles over national power versus states' rights, and liberal versus strict construction of the Constitution, and democracy versus rule by elites have defined all of American history. It all goes back to their battle over the Bank of the United States, and ever since then, presidents and Supreme Court justices and ordinary citizens have invoked their various positions throughout time.
Now, if you would have told us 30 years ago that Alexander Hamilton would be a hero of Democrats and the left in the United States, we would have said, no, you've got the wrong guy. Those are the Jefferson guys. The Republicans are the Hamilton guys. And at different points, at different times in American history, these two parties or these two factions have claimed these two sparring founding brothers at different points. Talk about the mutability, the fungibility of these avatars.
Mutability is exactly the right word. They're constantly being invoked by both sides. So after the Civil War, Hamilton is finished and everyone's a Jeffersonian. But then Theodore Roosevelt reads this history calling on him to deploy Hamiltonian means for Jeffersonian ends of curbing the corporations, and he begins to flip. Then Franklin Roosevelt reinvents the Democratic Party as the party of Jefferson the Democrat rather than the limited government Jefferson, and he kind of makes Jefferson the patron saint of the New Deal. Ronald Reagan says he left the Democratic Party because it had abandoned the limited government principles of Jefferson, reinvents the Republicans as the libertarian Jefferson. And then I just had the honor of giving the Liberty Medal at the National Constitution Center to Ron Chernow on the Hamilton musical. He said that when he wrote Hamilton in 1998, when he started to write it, no one was a Hamiltonian. He was the aristocrat who was kind of reviled, but then the book and the musical made him into the rap star of the moment for a multicultural age. And as you said, now the Democrats are Hamiltonian, even though Jefferson rejected Hamilton as an aristocrat. The point is that these are the organizing forces for our politics people invoke them on both sides, but they're what makes the center hold.
And whether it was these two or Edmund Burke and Thomas Paine having a very similar argument at about the same time, they need each other, right? Because one without the other will tip over in the wrong direction. So it's the tension between these two ideas, right, that makes it work.
That's exactly right. The tension between the ideas, whenever one thread pulls too far in the one direction or the other, both sides fall over and the violence begins. It's really significant that after Hamilton dies in the duel, Jefferson places a bust of Hamilton across from his own bust in the central entrance hall in Monticello. You can see it there today. And whenever he passed it, he would smile faintly and say, opposed in life as in death. And it was a beautiful reminder that for Jefferson, Hamilton is not a hated enemy to be destroyed, but a respected opponent to be engaged with. That productive tension that makes the center hold is something we've got to get back today.
Well, Aaron Burr probably wouldn't have shot him if he had been the person who history remembered him for until he was rescued by Chernow and Company. There was a selflessness to him and there was a patriotism to him that allowed him to tip his cap to Jefferson.
Exactly, and it's so important, as you say, that Jefferson and Hamilton converged in viewing Burr as a embryo Caesar, as Hamilton put it. If we have an embryo Caesar, 'tis Burr. As you say, Hamilton didn't like Jefferson, but he felt that Burr was conspiring to lead a secessionist movement in Louisiana and establish himself as a dictator. He sacrifices his life because he prefers principle over partisanship, and it's a noble reminder of their devotion to America.
Okay, where are we now? There are people who would tell me that we are in an ongoing constitutional crisis, and there are people who will tell me that this is we're just in a constitution, that this is a stress test in which we have an executive branch that wants to push every lever of power that it possibly can. We have certainly a Congress that doesn't want to do its Article I job. That's been a growing problem. Where are we now? Is this a crisis? Is this a stress test? Is this something else?
A crisis is when the president ignores an unambiguous order of the U.S. Supreme Court. No president in history has done that. But we are in the middle of a serious debate. Is President Trump Julius Caesar or Andrew Jackson? Both Hamilton and Jefferson fear a Julius Caesar who will subvert the republic, consolidate power, and install himself permanently. But President Trump's supporters say that he's Andrew Jackson, a populist who's using the power of the government to shrink the spoils system. And I think it's too soon for historians to tell, but what's so significant is the fear of a consolidating Caesar is what the framers were most concerned about. They debated presidential term limits, which we're talking about this week, with Jefferson wanting a one-year term limit for the president so he couldn't be tempted to install himself as a dictator. And Hamilton wants a president elected for life so he won't be tempted to flatter the people and contend to the public interest. The 22nd Amendment is passed because everyone thinks Franklin Roosevelt is a Caesar, and he actually dresses up as Julius Caesar during his birthday in 1934. Big mistake. Like, don't do it. But the point is that this is the eternal debate, and it's too soon to tell, but the concern of consolidating power, of Congress not doing its job, of the judiciary blessing an all-powerful executive is one that both Hamilton and Jefferson share.
Well, maybe we can get the Jeffersonian branch in that building back there to start doing their job. We've had quite a lot of Hamilton's branch holding sway. Jeffrey Rosen, we thank you so much, and thank you for this book. I hope everybody takes a look at this. Coming up, the king of Christmas. Your Almanac is next. This is your Almanac for today, Sunday, December 21st, 2025. On this day in 1970, a president met a king. The king of rock and roll, that is, Elvis Presley. Royally robed in purple velvet with a cape, Presley thought he was going incognito. He arrived at the White House unannounced and told the guards he wanted to meet with President Richard Nixon. Nixon was initially flummoxed, but his advisors concluded that a meeting could help with younger voters, despite the fact that Elvis's heyday was long gone by then. Aides quickly organized a meeting. In a letter, Elvis, who had long been a collector of police badges, offered his services in the war on drugs, suggesting he be made a federal agent at large. Elvis presented the president with a gift, a Colt 45 pistol. Tricky Dick wouldn't make Elvis a real lawman, but they did give him a badge, making him an honorary federal drug agent, a topic in which Presley certainly had great expertise. What a scene. The photo of the pair remains one of the most requested images from the National Archives. As Elvis headed back to Graceland that December, it would have been hard for him to have avoided hearing himself on the radio or in shops. Though it was 13 years old by then, Elvis's 1957 Christmas album, with hits like, of course, Blue Christmas, continued to be a massive seller, one of Elvis's most successful albums of all. How successful? 68 years later, that same album continues to be the best-selling Christmas album of all times. So whether you'll be home for Christmas or checking into the Heartbreak Hotel, best wishes for every blessing of the season from the team here at the Hill Sunday. Until next time.